to the Reflections podcast. My name's Nathan. This is my co-host, Steve. Steve and I have been best mates for like 16 years, essentially. That's why we do the podcast together. We met working in the same finance company and stuff like that. And today is a bit of an introduction to ourselves so that you, the audience, can get to know a little bit more about what drives us. So today, we're going to ask some very simple questions of each other, and we're going to sort of get into what motivates us and stuff like that. So, Steve, let's start with you. What would you say motivates you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What do you feel like when you wake up every day?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. For me, I was sort of thinking, how would I answer that now? But also, I heard a conversation where people said your purpose doesn't change throughout life. So I sort of went back and thought, well, what was my purpose when I was a kid? And I remember I used to write these poems where I sort of interpreted Australian poets and then wrote it into a comedy act. So I think I am there to help people, but also to provide entertainment in a humorous way. And life can be tough at times. There's a lot of things you sort of need to do, but I think sort of helping people to take away that stress, not that it replaces it, but also getting people into a feeling better at that time. That's sort of something I think is my purpose and probably a bit of a talent that people do come to me at times when things are difficult, and I can put them in a better position, put a bit of a smile on their face.
And are there things that you work on within yourself that allow you to more readily fulfill that purpose or to feel better about yourself in achieving the goals you want with regards to helping other people and things like that?
Yeah, lots of things. Look, I think education is key. I've just about to finish an MBA, which is my second postgraduate degree. So I do a lot of formal education. I read a lot. I listen to a lot. But I think it gets a point. There's only so much you can learn from theory, and it is about practical application as well. So I'm now 44. I've got a lot of life experience. Made a lot of mistakes. Not that I classify them as mistakes. I think there are learnings from that as well, and it gets you to where you want to be. Ultimately, being true to yourself will make you sort of how you reflect on those tough times. And then the more clearer you are about where you want to go and what's important to you, that sort of shapes who you hang around. It shapes where you spend your time and your priorities. People aren't busy; it's a lack of priorities. So if you're clear about where you want to go, what your purpose is, what your goals are, that'll help align your time, and it also align who you associate with. I don't believe that I know everything. In fact, I'm probably a big believer that everything I do know, despite sort of all my formal education, will get proven wrong at one stage of my life or beyond. So I think if you've got that mentality, you are open to hearing different perspectives, knowing that there's not one right way of doing something. In fact, I see a lot of successful people throughout my career, and a lot of people have done things very differently, and they may sort of achieve the same level of financial success. But that's the important thing as well. I don't think financial success is life success. In fact, they're very different. I've seen people with a lot of money who are probably quite unhappy. Things like family, purpose in life, they're the things that are really important to me. And just having focus on things that are really valuable, beyond sort of commercial. That doesn't mean you don't spend money. I mean, I love guitars. I've got some nice guitars, but I use those guitars all the time. And I think that's sort of the same with anything here. If you like a sport, or you might spend some money on lessons and getting great at those things, but you're doing it for a different reason other than sort of bragging to your mates on Strava. It's about just having a passion for something. So.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. You raised a lot of really good points there. Definitely, I've always found you learn a lot more from a loss than you do from a win, especially if you have the right mindset, which clearly you do. Um, other things like education and that, as you say, it's certainly whether it's a sport, whether it's formal education like an MBA, like you're doing and stuff like that. If you want to help other people achieve something that you're passionate about as well, you need to put what you know into practice as well as continue to educate yourself throughout. Because the more knowledge and the more wisdom you have, and then the more practical application you can use that for, the more obviously you can help fulfill your purpose of helping other people. So I think you touch on a lot of great points there. One of the other particularly great points I really, really loved was the difference between financial success and life success. And a lot of people, I think, are confused, or they think financial success is success and the definition of success. Personally, I say success is when preparation meets opportunity. Okay. And that is across the board. But let's jump into, what do you consider your life success? What do you think life success could look like for other people versus, simply financial success?
Yeah, look, it's something I reflect on every day. I am, oh, it's not hard to tell from my accent and the way I look that I'm from Australia, but my wife's from Brazil. So I've now been to Brazil 3 times. I just recently came back from Brazil, and a lot of the times I'm sort of weighing up what is the Australian lifestyle, the way to live things, versus what is a Brazil lifestyle. And it is super clear to me that despite sort of sometimes a lack of money, and to be clarified, Brazil, there is a lot of money. They're just in gated communities and you don't see them, but there's a lot of houses that 5 mil plus. So there is definitely wealth, but the distribution is different. But you walk down the streets, and a lot of people don't have money, but they're all happy. That and they're very close with their family. So I always take those things and I look back and I go, how can I use that information in Australia? And Australia is, the life is very much about success is, what house do you have? Where do you live? Do you have a car? Who do you hang around? And
You mean keeping up with the Joneses as far as financial success goes, or?
yeah, exactly. But where does that come from? It's been driven into you as a child. Success is to have a house, but at the moment, if you look at it purely a financial decision, the interest rates, you may get a house, but the mortgage you pay when it's now 30, 40 years, you're sometimes paying 3 times that price. And people say the property keeps going up. Yes, it did go up, and does continue to go up, but it didn't go up since the 80s. And if you actually look at a pure financial decision, I'm not convinced buying a house is now the best thing for someone in Sydney. I think the level of gearing and the servicing of that it means you need to earn a significant amount of money if you really want to get a house, especially in the eastern suburbs. I heard a stat that you need 600 grand individual income to service a house in the eastern suburbs. And
Let me quickly interject there for a moment.
yeah,
And we both worked obviously with high net worth individuals, and we know a lot of people that have money and things like that. Realistically, 600 grand as a personal income. I mean, what percentage of people are ever going to make that sort of money in a year? You know what I mean? It's
they're not. Yeah, I see these studies and everyone acts like they earn 600 grand when you go into a pub in Sydney, but they're not. They're living off credit cards a lot of the time, and they're struggling. And when this interest rates tripled, people were hurting so bad, and they're still hurting. And what I've so there's the people that sort of have this aspiration that they go, I can't even save for a deposit and things like that. I want a house. Then there's the people that actually get the house and go, Jesus, I've got to service this thing, and the amount of pressure that has, and they think they're successful because they've got a high paying job, but it's a massive trap. Like you got to put up with a lot of stuff from people that managers and companies that don't really care about you, just a number, but you have to keep that job to service your loan. So this sort of idea of a freedom that you see in Brazil, they may not have the houses, things like that, but they're free to do what they want. And I think a lot of people, it's not always about money, but they're trapped, and they were trapped early because they had to focus on getting this house. And I think if you take a step back and actually go, financially, this is not a good decision. It might have been a good decision back then, and their influence from their parents. So as I said, society keeping up with the Joneses, that came from somewhere, it came from parents and people at that age telling you this. But I also think that people these days are a lot more humble and they'll actually tell you. I mean, despite sort of Instagram and things like that, a lot of people know that they're now their parents' ideas weren't the best ideas. They were there was an element of fortune of getting a property back then and it making that amount of money. But yeah, like people talk about 17% interest rates back then. Try servicing a loan where it's like 12 grand a month for mortgage repayments. You can't do that unless you're earning a significant job, like earning. And one of my friends was looking at a house, and they've got a nice apartment in the inner west, and they want to get a house, and they're looking at $23,000 a month to do it and said, "Oh, we can't do it. We're trapped in the two-bedroom house in the nice eastern or inner west." So I think they're still successful, but they're still miserable because they're going, "Oh, I want to do this." But even if they do sort of find the job to get the $23,000 a month, they're going to be miserable because there's going to be so much pressure on keeping that job that they're never actually enjoying their life. And what's it for? Is it to provide for your kids? Every single kid that's sort of gone through difficult times says, I don't care about how much money that my parents are making. What I cared about was I never saw my parents because they're constantly overseas, they're constantly working back. And those people were so stressed when they do have some spare time, they're not actually going home and spending it with a kid. They're going to the pub and just drinking alcohol to sort of escape from that level of stress. So yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons that you learn. Money is great. It provides opportunity, but once you go past that and you make it about sort of financial success, you realize that you're not winning in life at all.
No, and there's a lot of studies. I'll talk about the housing thing as well in just a moment, but there are a lot of studies that say that when you have below a certain or earn below a certain amount, you're in the unhappy zone. When you get to that point, you're in the happy zone. But really, anything excessive above that, your happiness level doesn't increase at all, right? So you need a set amount of money, or a certain amount of money, to provide and do what you need to because of the expenditures of life. But really, as you say, like a lot of people, especially in the wealthier areas and that sort of thing, it looks great, nice car, nice house, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of debt. Um, it's a trap, and unfortunately, the housing market in Australia, and especially in Sydney, has become. I look at houses as mini prisons most of the time, and I know that sounds terrible, but that's the reality of it. So, if you look anywhere even half decent in Sydney, you're talking $2 million plus for a house. Okay, like way
Yeah.
out where you're going to spend an hour each way traveling to work, and that you might get one for one and a half. But realistically, you're talking probably minimum to probably even closer to 3 million for anything within a reasonable transit to work, and anything just reasonable. Like I've seen houses in the area just knock down rebuilds go for over $2 million. It's an insane amount of money, and people think they're establishing roots. Okay, so you have kids and you want to have roots and that sort of thing, right? And you look at the way real estate goes up. So what? It doubles roughly every 7 to 10 years, or has done, and it's difficult to comprehend how it can keep going because say a young couple, they have a child, for instance, right, or two kids, and they get into the market and they buy a house for $2 million, right, which is basically bare minimum in Sydney nowadays. In 10 years, if that it then goes to $4 million, the kids are about 10 years old. Another 10 years, it goes up to $8 million. The kids are about 20 now, probably just sort of going to uni and that sort of thing. And in the next decade, when they want to look for a house, if it doubles again, $16 million. Each child then, if they want to live in just a normal house in the suburb that they grew up in, are looking at spending $16 million each on a house. And any graph in the world will show you that income versus house prices it's not even close. The income doesn't go up anywhere near remotely the way the house prices are. So essentially, even by saying parents saying, "Oh, we want to create roots for our kids," and that, that child could come out of university with the highest paying job that you can get coming out of uni, and there's still no chance they're going to be able to buy a house in the area they grew up in. So it really is a trap. And for the parents that, do go and commit to, you were talking about 23,000 a month, and the audience have to remember it's just not for 1 month. You're talking about 30 years, and in 30 years, there's,
And then,
houses get renovations and updates and repairs, and you're going to need to update your car. There's other expenses that add on to that sort of thing. So maybe you're looking at 40 years. So if you get this loan at 30, you are basically trapped in a prison of societies and your own creation for the next 40 years, putting up with people and things that you don't want to just to have that house. And, it is very much keeping up with the Joneses. And I heard this a while back. So the Australian dream was always the house and the car, right, and the family and all that sort of thing in the suburbs. And it started originally, I think it's the American dream. But banks can't loan people money for nothing. So what do they sell? They sell the American dream or the Australian dream. You've got to have a house. And that's the message that's been pumped through our society now for generations. Get a house, have a family, blah, 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 blah. And it becomes a trap, especially in Sydney now, where essentially you're committing the rest of your life to go and have to work 5, 6, even 7 days a week sometimes for the next 30 or 40 years simply to have a roof over your head. And if you have multiple children, one day you're gone, that gets divvied up. They're still not really going to be able to afford to buy a house in the area that they grew up in. So it's a real conundrum, and it's crazy. So that's definitely the way society and people seem to be going. And it's been like that for a very long time. Like you, I don't think it's the way to go anymore. I think there are other opportunities out there, much more beneficial to not just your financial success, but certainly your mental and emotional well-being. And for me, life success. How many people listening to the podcast tomorrow can wake up at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and go to the beach without having to explain themselves? Just get up and go to the beach and have a great day. And then the next day, I don't know, go for a weekend away. The answer is basically not very many, because we're all trapped in this mortgage trap, or this little mortgage jail, as I like to call it. And it's really, I don't define that as life success at all.
the interesting thing, like the last trip I went to Sao Paulo, but the trip before I went up north, and that was one of the biggest eye-opening experiences, because that was the most poor spot that I went, and everyone lives literally next door to each other. So the kids will build a house. Like, I mean, obviously it's different rules in Brazil, but they'll build a house in the house block of their parents. So they live next door. And every single night you can come home to the grandparents and have dinner and things like that. And they're very close. And that's where you sort of go, geez, family is everything. And yeah, Australia's not like that for lots of reasons. I think it is hard to live in the same suburb as your parents, but I think that focus on family is not there. And it's there's a lot of sort of conflict in a lot of families and things like that. And I don't know why that's the case, but my wife does sort of say to me all the time, who's going to be there on your deathbed? And when you sort of think about that, it is often family is going to be there, and it's your close friends. And that's sort of what makes me really think about sort of who I do spend my time with, because when you do have to work, and my starting point is I want to be there for my child. I want to be there for my wife, and then I want to be there for my close friends. You don't really have a lot of time other than that. So why is it so important that you get on with these people at work, that really you're just a number, you're going to be gone. And that they won't care. They'll move on. So people will talk to you at work and act like they're best friends, but the second you're gone, you will never hear from those people again. And
No, and beyond that even, Steve, you'll understand as well. It's like the reality is people will devote themselves to a company or to a career, right? And say they give 30 or 40 years to a firm, and they think that, I'm integral part of the team, I'm so important. The second they're gone, whether they die or get sick or they quit or they retire, that night on the computer, boom, they've posted your ad for a replacement. Within a week, someone's in your chair and that's it. And you're not really that integral part of what you thought you were. Like you think you're part of building an empire or something like that. And the reality is you're not, you're just a replaceable cog in the wheel.
And that's the best case scenario that you actually retire on your own terms. Usually what will probably happen is will be going, okay, this guy's experience, he's coming up for his 30-year anniversary. How much are we paying for this person? Oh, we can just bring in two juniors and get him to do the job for less money. And they're probably planning that for a year. So the job's not getting advertised. They already replaced you before they make you redundant. So that's unfortunately more the reality of the situation. I think back in the day it was sort of your golden handshake, sort of you get the watch kind of thing, but yeah, it's very few and far between. And yeah, that's on both sides with people sort of go, oh, there's their employee loyalty, but the employer loyalty is not there either. So
No. And look, 40 odd years for a gold watch. No thanks, I'll get on my own watch.
exactly, yeah. Get the
Yeah.
one that you would like.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. So yeah, you speak a lot about the family orientation over in Brazil and stuff like that. And I'm a big advocate of that sort of thing. For me, I'd much rather have a success in life which enables me to spend time and have experiences with the people I love, whether it's going out for a day and just having a lark. And, you know, people do that. So people that have their normal jobs and they have the big mortgage for 30 or 40 years and that sort of thing, say they go to the beach for one day on the weekend if they get the time, right?
Yeah.
Often I know because I used to be like this myself and maybe we were or weren't, but I know that when I used to do it that way and I had the career that I had, even when I was at the beach, given our high positions up here, I was never at the beach. I was still in the office, you know. So I never got to spend any time with the people I cared about or the people I loved or getting to know them really because we could have a conversation, but I really wasn't paying attention. I was too busy working all the time in my mind. So for me, I've had a big 180 flip on that. And for me now, it's about quality time, being in the moment, being carefree enough to actually be present in what you're doing and really embracing the time and creating a genuine emotional and physical experience that you can enjoy for the rest of your life.
Yeah, look, I mean, everyone's talking about mindfulness at the moment, but I don't think anyone really knows how to do it because it's too busy talking about it. But if you actually try and do that switch off, it's difficult. I Back in the day, I could switch off two times when I'm going 200 k's an hour down a motorbike on a motorbike track because that's all I was focused on, or I'm trying to learn a complicated song on guitar because it was just hard. But I think mindfulness for me is just when you can sort of be focused in that moment and be 100% present, as you say. But it's not necessarily meditation for me. I think the work is done before that. It's not sort of in the 10 minutes. For example, everyone's scrolling on their phones at the moment with social media and blaming social media. But the phones are designed to do that. But you can make a decision. You can get a phone that's not a smartphone, it's got social media, or you can just delete it on your phone. At the moment, I don't have any social media on my phone. I've just got it on my laptop, and that's the only time I do it. And you might sort of say, okay, well, you can just jump on social media on your laptop, but the difference is there's no doom scrolling, so you're not doing it. And when you do go on it, you actually go, there's nothing there, nothing's changed. On my social media, anything I post is not really a reflection of my life. The friends and the family that know me, they know exactly what's going on because I tell them through conversations, face to face and over the phone. Um, and people sort of catch up with me on 5 years later and say, "Oh yeah, I followed all your Facebook posts." And I'm just like, it's such a small part, and it's really just for family that's sort of overseas that doesn't know. You can't sort of see me. I share a couple of things like that, but it's not sort of what I'm doing. I do a lot. I mean, yeah, just to sort of come back to your question, I sort of didn't have time to go to the beach. I would try and do everything. But now I'm sort of the opposite. I find something that is really good. I spoke to someone that coaches is a sort of mental coach for AFL and NRL players, and the first thing they sort of tell them is to book their holidays. And I tell everyone this sort of when I work with them, and everyone looks at me funny like I'm a weirdo that you'd want to book holidays, but they would do it. So, say you come out to a stressful period like the grand final, sort of semi-finals and things like that, where you need to be complete mental clarity. You can't do that when you're sort of already your batteries are low. So, rather than having a holiday that you go and just spend a fortune and not really enjoy it at the end when your batteries are so low, you're better off maybe having that holiday before you come into that busy period of the semi-final so you're fresh and you're sort of highest energy, but also have these mini breaks as well. And for me, being into the present moment, nothing does it better than just me spending time with my son. Like when I'm there, just sort of taking him to the park and spending time with him. I'm not thinking about anything else. Phone's off. I'm just spending time there, and those things. It's an individual thing, but everyone's talking about mindfulness, but no one's actually talking about what works. So I don't think people have these conversations about what works for them. As I said, meditation does not work for me at all. It's something that my definition is just, can I be totally present in that moment? And I think it's a lot of the work done before about sort of getting rid of the distractions that don't mean anything. Everyone's listening to podcasts and everyone's listening to all these different things, but it's just so much information. I I don't want to say I can't learn things. I'm a natural learner, but it's getting to the point that I listen to the same things, same messages over and over again, but it's what are you actually going to do with that information? So I'm sort of listening to a lot less these days. The new information, everything's about practical application, trial and error, and actually seeing sort of does these so-called theories actually work in practical application? They don't always. They don't always because two reasons. There's new methods, but also that's what worked for that person. It won't necessarily work for you. The thing that sort of I found works the best is going, let's sometimes forget about what the professional golf instructor is telling you. Actually work out whether that's going to be working for you or it's actually going to be sometimes what is the skill sets you already have. I've got a lot of tennis background. A golf shot is just a backhand. When I stop thinking about 15, 20 different things when I'm trying to hit a golf shot and just actually just sort of do the natural talent. People say it's 20 meters. You've got to take it back a certain distance before you hit the thing. I've I've done a million times at other sports. I know how to hit 20-meter shot. I don't need to take it back a certain amount. I can take it back no amount, but follow through quicker. It's just all feel. And when I just sort of adopted things like that, things just got a lot easier and it was less information. I think that's why I got a lot easier because my mind wasn't cluttered. That's probably why I played better. Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's sort
look,
of what I do in life. Yeah.
I think one of the most interesting points there of all is the difference between learning something from a book and learning it for yourself. So we do have a tendency to live in a society where people will hyper-analyze things, never put any of it into practice, but think they know all the answers. But without actually being able to do it for yourself, you don't really understand the concepts at all. You just know what someone else wrote.
Mhm.
And that's not a difficult thing to do if you have a bit of a memory, right? Like such and such said this or such and such did that. Even with regards to the golf, I know there's a couple of past major winners on the PGA Tour and that sort of thing, and they had a coach when they were young, and they went into the shop and said to him, "How do you hit a flop shot?" And the coach said, "There's a bunker out there. Put the balls behind it. Go out all day and come back and you tell me how to hit a flop shot at the end of the day." So
Yeah.
they had to go out and try and muck around with the different angles of face and hand positions and all that sort of stuff. But by doing that, by allowing them to actually learn it themselves, they're never ever going to forget that. You know, you can forget something you hear or whatever else, but by making them do that, and it wasn't just that one shot, it gets them to think about, all these things in all these other shots and things like that. So the capacity to learn for yourself is essential. Now, I'm not saying don't learn from books. Obviously, you want to get a bit of a background in that, but then you actually have to go and apply it yourself because everyone's
Yeah.
different, everyone's unique. the very, very best coaches in the world, basically, it's like speaking a dozen different languages because everyone's so different. Are you cerebral? Are you more feel orientated? Do you do this? Do you do that? A good coach is able to get the message through to basically every different type of person there is to get similar outcomes. Otherwise, you have the standard, sorry. Otherwise, you have what I call cookie cutter coaches, which basically read a book and say, this is how you do that. And that's all they can teach. And it may apply to 1 out of every 20 students. So they're really not getting the best results for themselves or their students. So learning for yourself, actually applying what you learn is the most important aspect of it, because simply learning it or reading it, I mean, there's a big difference. You can learn how to swim by reading a book. That's a hell of a lot different when you jump in the water, right? So, you've got to be willing to learn, educate, but then apply. It's very
I think
important.
the other thing to just add on that thing I've also learned is trying to teach someone else. So you talked about sort of what is sort of happiness. It's not financial success. They say the reasons why people do charity stuff is because that service actually makes them the happiest. But I think sort of when you're trying to teach someone else as well, that service of helping others, you realize that quickly that what worked for you won't necessarily work for them, and you sort of get clear on, okay, that's what it said in the textbook. That's what worked for me. Why is it different? And then you sort of break it down to what are the fundamentals and what is the one thing that's going to probably make the biggest difference for that person, improve it kind of thing, rather than giving them 15 different things. And you then have a lot more conviction about sort of what you're saying. And you'll go to different places, you'll do different things, and you realize that it worked perfect in that situation. Then you go to the next place, it didn't work as well, or vice versa. It was a lot easier. So yeah, I think those things, it is so much about practical application.
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah, 100%. Give me 1 second. I was just going to have to get edited out this bit. Yeah. Well, one of the other things you touched on before was the doom scrolling on the phones and that sort of thing. And I took my young sons to the aquarium the other day, and we went on the train. And you see everyone on the train. It's a metro train where basically the whole middle of the carriage, you can see the whole length of the train. You can see seats down either side and that sort of thing. And my son, he says, Dad. I said, yeah. He goes, have a look around. I had a look around. I knew what he was going to say already. I was very proud of him for picking it up. He's like, everyone else is on their phones. There's maybe only one other person other than us actually talking or looking out the window. And it's a shame. And does it come back potentially to being so stressed out that that's people's escape potentially from the mortgage or the rent and the cost of living and stuff like that? Is it just that people don't know any better? You said, for instance, you put your stuff on your laptop so you can't doom scroll on that. I have some stuff on my phone, but I think the key component is awareness, being self-aware enough to know what you do and don't do. So for me, in the morning sort of thing, waking up, I might flick through some of the news, even though most of that I'm not a big fan of reading. It's normally misinformation, I think. So I'll flick through the phone for about 5 2 minutes for that, and that's it. Now I won't do it again, right? But there were times in the past where I'd sit there and suddenly an hour or two was gone, and I just went, oh my God, I'm not learning anything. I'm not achieving anything. I'm not working towards anything doing this. This has literally just been a waste of 2 hours of my day. There has to be something better I can do. I'd much rather be leaving video messages to my children, helping other people. And you touch on helping other people and charity work and that. They've literally done scientific studies of the human brain under MRI, and they've exposed the people to all sorts of different drugs and chemicals that make you feel good. The number one, the center of the part of the brain that feels joy and happiness as a human, the number one response was always the same, even under MRI, helping someone else genuinely and without regard for reward or anything else, just merely helping another person without any secondary reason for doing so is the number one pleasure the human brain can feel. And that's why I think it's essential. And we both, same thing, you said your purpose was to help other people in a humorous way. And I'm sure the audience, we're going to love to see one of your breakdown music skits at some stage. That'll be hilarious. Can't wait to see that. Helping other people is what it's about. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting just quickly on the phone. So I hear all this sort of commentary that, oh, this generation's always on their phone. And A, we didn't have that sort of advantage. Probably I think a phone was available when I was 18. So that's one thing that I didn't have that 18 years as a kid. I wasn't given something that is absolutely a marketing tool, like in your hand when I was under 18. But the other thing is, where do these kids get this from? They get it from the parents. They look around. You're as a parent, that first 7 years, you're so influential, and all they see is their parents on their phone all the time. And as you say, it's any parent will be quick to sort of go, oh, it's the kids and all this and this new generation. But it's not true. As you said, when you're going out, everyone is on their phone, whether you're traveling to work, when you're walking. And they say you're right, there is an element of sort of that's a stress relief. Yeah, it's the same reason people have alcohol and other things, because it's not because they're an alcoholic, it's because they're actually there's something that they're trying to escape. And that's what the phone is as well. It's a element of escape. But the reality is that if they're stressed, they're probably better off to be outside. They're better off to not be on the phone. They're better off to exercise and do all these things. So the phone actually is a circular thing in the sense that they're going to go on their phone and then become more and more stressed because they're not exercising, they're not escaping, they're not clearing their mind, they're just filling it with more and more garbage. And then they just become more and more stressed. So yeah, look, it's a classic example.
And it is hard to escape because even with the kids at school now, they have all these different apps that they use that they message you on. I mean, that stuff didn't exist 30 years ago and everyone got by just fine, right? It's not really more convenient to have everything on your phone because your phone just buzzes constantly, between WhatsApp and then normal messages and Facebook, all the different alerts and that. I turn all mine off, okay, because it drives me mental. I check my phone when I want to check it. And that's about it, other than for important calls or important messages and things like that. Uh, it
Yeah, but
is.
Nate, I'd just say on that, there is sometimes, and I know you're not like this, but for some people, there is always an excuse of why they can't do it. You can have a watch these days where you can get those messages, so you don't need to hold the phone on you. If you're aware that that's going to have doom scrolling, there's other ways of getting around it. There's always a solution if you want to find it. There's always an excuse if you want to rely on that as well. The other thing is you can put on settings these days with certain apps and things like that to say you've been on this for 2 hours. Like if you want to only be
Yeah.
on half an hour a day, um, the, the
I
laptop
find
thing
it
is
a
just
little bit
something that works.
sad.
Yeah, sorry.
Don't you find it a little bit sad that you need an app to tell you you've been on there for too long? Like for me, self-awareness,
Absolutely. Yeah. You know,
you know,
I
self,
look, go on.
self-awareness and sort of flicking back to what you were saying before, you know, it is about the quality of life that you actually want, right? So you said that rather than out exercising outside, people are on the phone, that just makes them more depressed because they're not out doing all those things. You're 100% correct.
Hmm.
But there's got to be some, and I think you spoke about it. We're talking a bit about purpose and that because the reality is there's an infinite number of blueprints into how an individual can live their life. Most people get told the house and the car and the kids or whatever, right? Fair enough. But there's an infinite number of roadmaps that you can take to live a very happy and fulfilling life. And most people just simply aren't aware of any more than maybe one or two directions. But you go get a trade or you go to uni. Yeah, there's other methods for living a really successful and happy life when it comes to life success and true freedom, right? Um, and um, the reality is with purpose, then you have your intention. Okay, so you know what drives you, helping other people. Okay, so what then are your end goals and what roadmap do you need to take to achieve that? Okay, it's a bit like anything else. People think they need a big house and a big car and all that sort of stuff. If you go and buy a Porsche or a Mercedes versus a Toyota, why don't you work out mathematically how many other hours you have to work and be at work and commit to your life to have that car versus the cheaper car and decide whether you want to have those hours to yourself and be free, or whether you want someone to go, hey, great car as you drive past. Like it's ludicrous to me sometimes, you know what I mean? And I think people need to really help define their own purpose, what drives them. We already know that helping other people is the number one cause of happiness in humans. It's just a biological response. So in both of our lives, we want to help other people and do stuff like that. So we have a clear outline as to what goals we have and how we're going to achieve them. And we did in all our other careers and stuff like that as well, don't get me wrong. And we've always been very good at that. But that's why even with the phones, I don't spend time on the phone, because I did and went, oh, no, I'd much rather be at the gym, or I'd be rather hanging out with my kids or someone I care about, stuff like that. And I think people need to, as I said, it's a bit sad that they have an app to say, you've been on here for 2 hours. Just put the phone down, especially stuff like that. The phone's great. I love the phone. If there's a fact or a bit of knowledge that pops up and people are even debating it, it's so easy to jump on your phone and work out what the truth of things is nowadays. And you can educate yourself so much just using your phone. But that's the choice with self-awareness that you have to come to too, is, do you want to sit there and watch reels and silly stuff? Do you want to have a debate with some random person on Facebook who's never going to agree with you and spend 3 hours backwards and forwards, little snarky messages? What are you achieving with your life by doing that? What are you getting out of it? And the most important thing you touched on was the escape, right? So you said alcoholism, the phone, and all that sort of stuff. I worked out a while ago that if you build a reality that you truly love, you never want to escape it. You want to be in that reality because that is your idea of bliss and happiness and fulfillment. And so why would you want to escape that? And I'm not saying you can't go and have a couple of drinks with your friends and, have a great time. I'm not saying that at all, but, the requirement to need to drink, or to need to be on your phone, or to need to partake in drugs, or, random promiscuous sexual activities and stuff, that person needs to identify that they're trying to escape something, or there's something missing within themselves that they need to fulfill. And they'd be much better spent taking a step back and going, all right, what do I need to do to build the life that I want, that allows me to truly feel free and happy and build a life that you don't ever want to escape?